guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover, and I'm here with a January wrap-up. Yes, that's right, you heard it. I'm actually coming back with my wrap-ups, going to try and keep going and get some videos out and get back into the spin of things. And yeah, hopefully I can just churn out a few more videos than I have been doing the past few months. But yeah, I really wanted to talk about some of the books I read in January because I had some ones that I really enjoyed, some others that I didn't enjoy so much, and I'm going to talk to you about them now. So the first book that I actually finished in January was an audiobook, and that was Reality Check by Vicki Notaro. This was a really fun, kind of glamorous, dramatic book, and it was very fun to listen to an audiobook. This is the author's debut novel, and I was aware of the author before because she is a journalist in Ireland. She was the editor of a magazine that I used to read. I follow her on like socials and stuff, so I was very aware of this book and kind of aware of her own online presence and some of the things that the author likes and doesn't like. So I was able to see a lot of her kind of own likes and dislikes in the book itself, and I just thought that was like, and sometimes that can actually kind of take away from a book. I feel like if you feel like you know the author too much and you almost feel like they are putting themselves too much of themselves into the book, where in this one I actually feel like it worked really well because I felt like the author knew what she was talking about when she was writing about certain things. So this book follows a character called Portia Daniels. She is in her late 30s and she is in a relationship with this Irish man. Her mother is actually Irish. They live in the United States. Her mother is in LA specifically, and her mother is actually one of these kind of like Real Housewives kind of characters on a Real Housewives show. So basically like a reality star. But Portia is a TV writer. She doesn't really want to be in like the limelight, unlike her mother and also her sister, who was like a model turned influencer. So she likes to take a little bit of a step back. And at the start of this book, Portia's boyfriend ends up kind of dropping this bomb on her, which kind of changes the entire course of their relationship, and she really has to figure out what to do next, what she wants in her life, some really big decisions. So she ends up going home to LA for a while, to her mother's house, and then at the same time her sister's marriage ends up imploding, so she also returns home. So Portia ends up having to kind of look after her sister while also trying to deal with like her own things. And this is just a really fun look at like glamorous Hollywood, reality shows, reality TV, paparazzi, influencer lifestyle, and I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good, like, fun time. There are some really interesting kind of topics around this, around not wanting children, and that being like still kind of like this taboo thing for women to talk about or women to express, and everyone, you know, telling them that they're going to change their mind when they're very obviously pretty like adamant that they don't want children. There's actually 2 books I read this year so far that have kind of touched upon that subject, and it's kind of nice to see it being brought up more in books as something that, you know, it's okay for women to not want children when the world is basically telling you that you have to have children, or you're like there's something wrong with you if you don't. So I liked the way this was explored in this book, and yeah, just kind of some of the romantic ups and downs. I do think that there was some pacing issues with this, like the middle of it felt very long and drawn out, and there were some parts of it that kind of bordered on this kind of, like, this is obviously written by an Irish author, but there are parts of it that kind of bordered on this kind of Irish feel I feel like that Americans sometimes have about Ireland, and that was a little bit, you know, a little bit like just not as good. But overall, I did actually really enjoy it. It was just a good time. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm looking forward to reading the author's next book, which will be coming out this year as well. The next book I read, I do have a physical copy, but I don't know where it is. And that is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. So this was my first physical book of the year. And in this one we follow 2 brothers, Ivan and Peter. Peter is the older brother. He is a lawyer. And Ivan is in his early 20s, and he is kind of like this chess master prodigy. And he kind of goes around like basically playing chess against like local clubs and stuff. And that's what he kind of does. But the 2 of them have a kind of a strained relationship. There's quite a large like age gap between the 2 of them, and their father, just at the very start of this book, has passed away. So we see them grappling with their grief over their father as well, and it kind of, there's just like certain things that like their communication style mostly kind of tends to sour the relationship between them, and they end up saying the wrong things or doing the wrong things and not being able to express themselves enough, which is obviously very classic Sally Rooney. And then we see the 2 of them kind of get into their own romantic entanglements. Ivan ends up getting into a relationship with an older woman, and we see how that again is also something that ends up causing him some tension with Peter. And then Peter himself is in a kind of this on-off non-relationship relationship with an old friend, who they can't seem to like not be in each other's lives, while at the same time he's also in an actual relationship with this younger woman as well. And we see how that kind of, these two women are kind of orbiting around him, and he's trying to figure out his feelings for the two of them, and they're just going about their lives, and yeah, with these romantic entanglements. I liked this. I gave it 4 stars. I don't know actually if it's probably a little bit lower, because for some reason I had a really hard time getting through this. I don't know whether it was just like my own mind at the start of the year, but it took me like a really long time to read this. And eventually, I never do this, but I actually bought the Kindle version of it as well. So I was able to read it on my Kindle or on my phone, the Kindle app on my phone. And that's how I ended up actually being able to read it faster. For some reason, the physical copy of this just like was really like not doing it for me, which is very odd because that like never really happens. So yeah, I don't know. I just found it kind of one of these kind of books that was just, even though I was enjoying it, I think I felt like there wasn't enough happening in it to get me really invested in it enough. And like Sally Rooney isn't an author where her books have a lot of action, so I don't know why I was struggling so much. But with this one, I did. So it's a 4 stars, but I think it might actually be more of a 3.5 stars. Definitely, obviously not my favorite Rooney. I think that still goes to normal people. But I'm glad I read it, and yeah, I think it does show a strength in her writing as well. I feel like her writing is just getting better and better, and even though the story and the characters itself didn't work for me in this sense, her writing was still like excellent. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to whatever she brings out next, probably in the next year or two, I presume. So yeah. After that, I read a translated book from Japanese, and that was Diary of a Void by Emi Yagi. And this one was really interesting. I actually thought this was a different book when I first put it down, that I was going to read it in January, and then when I went to read it, I was like, oh, this is a completely different book than the one I thought I was going to be reading. But in this one, we follow a character who is think she's like in her 30s, and she is working in this office, and she's kind of just like one of these people in the office where they kind of take advantage of her in a way, and she's used to do everything. She has to go, like, she's the one that has to clean the kitchen, or like do the recycling, look after packages, like clean up the coffee cups after a meeting, things like that, even though that's not actually part of her job description. She actually has like her own job to do, but she's also expected to do all of these other things, and she's just feeling completely fed up of it. So one day when people ask her, oh, are you not going to like clean the cups after the meeting? I think the cups still need to be cleared. She says, oh no, I can't do that. I need to sit down more because I'm pregnant. And this is a complete lie, because she's not pregnant. But then it kind of ends up spiraling into this like massive lie where everyone then believes that she's pregnant. So for 9 months, she continues with this lie. She goes to like, prenatal classes and like pregnancy exercise classes, and starts like, talking about baby names with her colleagues. And you kind of see how she ends up like, in a way, getting so much more freedom, because all of this kind of expectation upon her to be a certain way or act a certain way is lifted. And then she ends up being able to go home earlier, and she kind of ends up getting this new lease of life where she's able to like cook for herself a little bit better, and explore a little bit more, and actually like get more of her day back, because she's not in work so much. Like, she doesn't have all this work pressure on her again because she's pregnant, so she needs to get home a little bit earlier. And I just thought it was really interesting to see how the author used the whole thing of her being pregnant to look at this kind of like this really suffocating work-life imbalance that I think a lot of people have now, and how it's so hard to get yourself out of that kind of mind frame of you always need to be working, and if you're not working, if you're not staying late, if you're not doing extra, you're doing something wrong, and how actually taking that time back for yourself is such a beneficial thing. Now, we do see how the lies do kind of obviously go a little bit out of control, and they actually start, like, she almost starts believing her own lies in a way. But I really loved this is like quite a short book. It's only like 200 pages, but I really loved how the whole thing was explored. I don't think it was done in a like negative way, or a way that could be insulting to anyone. I actually just thought like the character herself is quite charming in her own way. She's like a little bit strange but at the same time she's very lovable. And I really loved the ending, because the ending is just the way, I won't say too much, but I really loved the ending because it gave you enough but not everything, and I kind of liked that. So yeah, this was a 4, like I gave it like a 4.25 on Storygraph. Not quite a 5 stars, but a very, very strong 4 stars. I very much enjoyed it. And then the next book I read was also an audiobook. And this was The Mystery Guest by, I was about to say The Mystery Guest by Molly the Maid. The Mystery Guest by Nita Prose, which is the second book in the Molly the Maid series. And it's actually been like 2 years, I think, since I read the first book in this series. And I fell into like Molly the Maid's narration so quickly. I think the first time I read it physically. So I think this is the first time I've listened to the story on audiobook, and I would highly recommend the audiobook because I think Molly's way of thinking and speaking to people and just narrating her own story is really good for audiobook, and the narrators are really good as well. So I would recommend the audiobook a lot because I really enjoyed it and like flew through it as well. So in this one, we're back with Molly the Maid, who it works within this big hotel, kind of a fancy hotel. And in the first book, we saw her like have to be involved and have to solve this murder mystery. And she's hoping like things are kind of like settled down now for herself. And they are hosting this like big author event. But then on the day of the event, the author ends up, before he's able to do this big announcement, he ends up dropping dead. So lo and behold, there is another murder mystery in this hotel, and Molly again, not quite the suspect, but is still like smack bang in the middle of it. And she ends up having to kind of try and investigate a little bit to help out her friends in the hotel. And also we see that she does actually have a connection with this author that goes way back to her, like her childhood. And we get flashbacks to Molly as a child and her gran and their relationship. And we just see a lot more of her childhood. And again, we kind of learn a little bit more about Molly, her grandmother, and also Molly's mother as well. And I really enjoyed seeing a little bit more in that way. And yeah, I just thought the mystery was grand. Like it wasn't like this really complicated thing, but I think there were a couple of red herrings in there that did kind of, spin you out a little bit. I did actually quite enjoy the way that happened. I loved the side characters. I loved the introduction of some new characters, and yeah, I just thought this was really, really fun. So I gave this again another very strong 4 out of 5 stars. And I'll definitely be reading the third book in this series, which I think comes out this year. It's either already out or it's coming this year. So I'll definitely be reading that because they're just very enjoyable, cozy mysteries to read. And now that I know that they're so good on audiobook as well, I'll be looking out for the audiobook. After that, I picked up a non-fiction book. I like to try and read at least one non-fiction book every month. And for this month, I read Dog Days: A Year with Olive and Mabel by Andrew Cotter. I actually was gifted this by Jade over at Boho Bookworm a couple of years ago, so big thank you to her. And I finally got around to reading it, which I'm happy about. So Andrew Cotter is a sports journalist or sports like commentator in the UK, and he kind of went a little bit viral during COVID, because obviously there was no sports on television, and that's like his main job, and he was kind of a little bit lost about what to do if he wasn't going to be doing that. So he ended up sharing a lot of videos of his 2 dogs, Olive and Mabel, who are 2 Labradors, and he was like commentating like their actions as if they were like playing a sports game. And they got really, really popular, and like a lot of them went super viral. So this is actually kind of taking place at the end of 2020 into 2021, and it is basically a diary of that year for him. And he talks about the after effects of obviously those videos going viral, and he's doing some kind of events with Olive and Mabel, and he's saying how like bizarre it is to be like going on television with his dogs, and his dogs being like the star attraction, and how like no one is really there to see him, they're there to see Olive and Mabel. And he's also talking about a lot about kind of COVID lockdown, and we obviously were still in a lot of lockdowns late 2020 and into 2021, and then the bringing in like of the vaccines and stuff, and he talks about that and the effect of that. And what I thought was interesting as well, he kind of brings up the fact that like it ended up being such a dividing topic for family and friends when this all came in, not just lockdown but then the vaccine conversation as well. And he kind of talked about how sometimes like you kind of learned things you didn't actually maybe want to learn about people you thought you were really close to. And he also just talks about like different sports and different ways he was kind of starting to get his life back. And yeah, this was enjoyable. It wasn't quite what I thought it would be. What I was actually hoping was more like just mostly his relationship with Olive and Mabel, which was in there. But he actually has a book that I think he published before this one, which is more focused on that and not in like diary form, I don't think, but I think it's more of like his beginnings with Olive and Mabel when he got them maybe them as puppies and stuff like that. So I thought that's what this book was going to be. So I was a little bit disappointed that it wasn't that, but I still kind of enjoyed the general like day to day of his life with them, and kind of the reminder of like so much can be going on in the world and in your own life, but if a dog goes out and gets a good walk or just finds a nice stick to chew, like their day is made. Like dogs are like so simple in a way, they get so much enjoyment about over such small things, and sometimes it's easy for us to forget that you can find joy in the smaller things. And this was a kind of a nice reminder, as well as myself, every time I'm looking at Rossi out on a walk and she finds a stick and it's like the best thing she's ever seen in her life. Yeah, I think it was just a nice reminder of that. So I gave this like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's cute, but it wasn't, like, as I said, it wasn't quite the book I thought it was going to be. And then finally, after that, I read my first 5-star book of the year, which I was very happy about, and that was Anybody Out There by Marian Keyes. This is the 4th book in the Walsh family series that she has. Now you can actually read all of these books as standalones. I like to read them. I've been reading them in order because I like to know kind of the previous sister's story, because all the sisters kind of like appear in and out of each other's books, and they're kind of in time order as well. So this was Anna's book, and Anna's always kind of been like kind of the kooky younger sister, a little bit like airy fairy in the other books. And in this one it was kind of interesting because we see that she has this like really kind of the best job in the world, as everyone tells her, because she works in beauty PR, and she is actually living in New York with her husband. And she's like quite a different Anna than we have seen in the previous books. She's like a lot more grown up. She obviously has this like kind of high flying job where she has to work really hard at, and is living in New York, which is like this hustle bustle kind of lifestyle. And at the start of the book, we see that she's come home to Dublin and she's in her mum and dad's house, and she's recovering from this terrible accident. Like, she's really badly injured, and she keeps thinking about getting home to New York and getting home to her husband Aidan, and kind of seeing him again. So we see that kind of like the first few chapters that really be like at forefront of her mind, and she's trying to like deal with these injuries and what has happened to her, but we don't really know what has happened. We're not being told. And then she goes back to New York, and we see her having to try and get her life back after everything that has happened. And you're left with some like really big reveals, kind of not even halfway through, but like kind of to really split the time like between Dublin and New York. And then we see her kind of have to grapple and get her life back. And I just enjoyed this so much. This was so funny, as a lot of Marian Keyes books are. So funny, like genuinely laugh out loud funny, but then also so heartbreaking and moving at different times. I thought it was such a good portrayal of relationships, family, grief, just like trying to find yourself again, just like learning about yourself in different ways, self-growth in a way, I guess, as well. But yeah, there was just so much in this that I absolutely loved. I'm like obsessed with Anna. She's like my favourite sister so far. I think my favourite book before this was probably Rachel's Holiday, and Rachel does appear in this because Rachel does live in New York as well. So we see her in and out of Anna's life and like helping Anna, and the Rachel we see in this book is so different and so much more mature than the Rachel we saw in her book. So seeing that growth itself was also really, really lovely to see. But yeah, I absolutely love this. 5 out of 5 stars, and I can't wait to read Marian Keyes' latest book, which is My Favourite Mistake, which is actually also Anna's book, which is also like follows her like a few years later. So I can't wait to reunite with Anna in that book. But I need to read Helen's book, Rachel's second book before I can get back to Anna. But I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, I will be doing that hopefully this year. We'll see how fast I get through them. And then the last book I read in January was actually an audiobook as well, and that was the Happy Ever playlist by Abby Jimenez. And this one is one that I've heard so much about, both from my friends in real life and also everyone on BookTube. They're just obsessed with this author's like rom-coms, and she's very, very popular. So I decided to listen to this one because it was actually the only one that my library has of her. And in this one we're following Sloane, who is recovering from the death of her husband. Her husband has been dead for 2 years, and we see, or her fiance, and we see at the very start of this book, it's the anniversary of, I think, his accident that like led to his death, and she is in like a really bad place. She is obviously grieving and really sad, and then a dog ends up jumping through the sunroof of her car, and her whole day is kind of like flipped upside down because of this, and she ends up having to go and try and find this dog's owner, and the two of them end up like with this text conversation because he's actually away for work, and his name is Jason, and we see through them very, very quickly strike up this like very flirty friendship between the two of them. And from the very start, Jason is very much like, when I get back, I want to like bring you out on a date. And you know, she's a little bit more reticent, obviously, because she's still slowly kind of grieving her fiance, and she doesn't 100% know. She kind of knows that she'd like to start dating again, but she doesn't know if she's ready for a relationship again. So we see that kind of build and build until he gets back, and it's kind of very quickly like they do fall into this like very like strong kind of relationship where they have very strong feelings for each other. But his job is actually like a little bit more bigger than like he was letting on, and that he is quite this like well-known musician. He has to go on tour soon, which could be a very, very long time, and it's not very good for relationships. So they very, very, very quickly have to kind of figure out what they want to be to each other, how deeply they want to be in it with each other as well. And we see this like really struggle between the two of them, and how it all kind of goes, has its ups and downs. This one like was fine for me. I really thought I would like it more. I don't know whether it suffered from hype, but I think for me, Jason as the main character just like didn't do it for me at all. I didn't really find him attractive. There was a lot of stuff that he was doing at the start for Sloane that I just felt was so unrealistic. I was just very much like, sometimes you're reading these books, obviously like all these romance books, the men act in certain ways, and they act in like romantic ways and ways you would like a man to act, and it's because they're written by women. And sometimes you can forget that, you know, but for this one I was just so aware of all the stuff that he was doing. I was like, it's so obvious that this guy is written by a woman, because I feel like nothing he is doing is realistic. Like there's some things, yes, but like not everything. I just felt it was just like too much, and I got just like the major like ick from him. It's kind of actually funny because in the previous book I read, the Marian Keyes book, there was like this thing, the characters coined this term called feathery stroker for a man who was kind of giving them the ick, and they'd say, oh, he's a bit of a feathery stroker. And then I listened to this after I read that book, and all I could think about in that book was that Jason was a feathery stroker. I was like, he's such a feathery stroker. He is giving me the ick. Just the way he's acting, just absolutely not for me. And yeah, I think this was trying to do a little bit of a what's the Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga movie, kind of like that kind of thing. Not like actually that movie, but this kind of like, you know, musician, like lifestyle, lovers, that kind of thing. And it just didn't work for me. I don't know, there was just something about it that I was just not feeling it at all. So yeah, that was kind of disappointing to not enjoy that one as much. However, I do still think what I do really like about Abby Jimenez is that she always seems to have like a dog in her book, which I do like. And I do think I would like to read the next book after this, because we did see a very brief introduction of the main character, the male character, who will be in the next book in this series or this trilogy. And I was intrigued by him, so I think I would like to pick up that book and see if I like that one a little bit better. And then also I would like to try one of her newer ones of the next series that she has, that people are like obsessed with, because people really do love that series of books. So I would like to pick those up too, because maybe this one, I just think this one, the characters in this one and the lifestyle in a way just wasn't suited for me at all. So I think maybe it was more that than the actual writing or anything that like really didn't get to me. It was mostly the male character. I just really just didn't like him. And it wasn't that I didn't like him. He seemed like a really nice guy. I just wasn't attracted to him at all. And when you're reading a rom-com, you kind of want to be attracted to the male character. So yeah, that's what it was for me. So I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. It was fine, but it just wasn't my favourite. So that's everything I read in January. Please let me know what you guys read. I'm really happy to be back finally talking about the books that I've been reading, because even though I haven't been doing videos, I have been reading. So I do still try and update like my Goodreads and my Storygraph, and also I do share a lot of the books I'm reading on Instagram too. So yeah, I will be posting there, as well as hopefully continuing to post here as well. So thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.